My daughter pushed my suitcase toward the door and said, "We don't want you. You are not coming with us." The wheels scraped against the hardwood. I reached for the handle. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the hallway chair. The sandals I had bought for Cancun stared up at me from the open case. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I am 78 years old. I spent 40 years organizing other people's books. Now I organize my own pain. That morning I was buttering toast in my small kitchen. The tablet lit up beside my coffee cup. Theo's Instagram. 4 faces grinning under Mexican sun. There was Sophie in her wide-brimmed hat. Martin holding something green and tropical. Isla in white cotton. Theo making peace signs at the camera. The caption said they were having the time of their lives in Cancun. A week before, Sophie had called to tell me the trip was postponed. "Work complications," she said. "Too much stress to travel right now." I set down my butter knife. The blade clinked against the plate. I had not asked to be included in their vacation. But back in March, Sophie had insisted I would love the warm water. We would float together at sunset, she promised. I bought new sandals, soft ones that wouldn't hurt my feet on long walks. I practiced climbing stairs, up and down, building strength for their adventure. The toast grew cold in my mouth. I scrolled through more pictures. Sophie at a buffet, laughing behind a plate of tropical fruit. Martin in swim shorts. The children splashing in turquoise water. Someone had commented asking where Grandma Ellie was. No one had replied. I closed the tablet. The kitchen fell quiet except for the old refrigerator humming its familiar tune. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I walked to the walnut desk in the corner. Arthur had organized everything before he died. My watchmaker husband who labeled every drawer in careful block letters. I pulled open the one marked important. Inside were 12 years of my kindness, filed and documented. Bank transfer receipts. Cancelled checks. Little notes I had written to myself. Theo's dormitory deposit. March 2019. Isla's sewing class fees. June 2020. Martin's bridge toll payments when his card expired. October 2021. Sophie's rent help during her career transition. January 2022. Each slip of paper had my pencil marks beside it. "Pay you back after my bonus," Sophie had said. "Just until things settle down," Martin had promised. Temporary help, they all called it. I added the numbers twice. $31,400. That didn't count the dinners I cooked when they were too tired. The hours I spent watching their children. The emergency pickups from school and work and airports. The ways I absorbed their panic so they could sleep at night. I stacked the papers into neat piles. Arthur would have been proud of my organization. On the tablet, Theo had posted a new video. The family at dinner, toasting something with tropical drinks. The restaurant looked expensive, the kind of place my money had helped make possible. I watched their faces glowing in the candlelight. They looked relaxed, happy, complete. They looked like a family who had successfully left someone behind. I closed the tablet again and sat in the quiet kitchen. The morning sun moved across my hands, warming skin that had worked and given and asked for so little in return. For 40 years I had helped people find what they were looking for. Books, information, answers to questions they didn't know how to ask. Now I needed to help myself find something. I needed to find my way back to being more than useful. The phone sat silent on the counter. No one would call to check on me today. They were too busy enjoying the vacation I had helped pay for. The vacation I had been told was cancelled. The butter knife lay beside my cold toast, catching morning light like Arthur's old watch hands. Precise, purposeful, ready to mark time that belonged to someone else. I picked up the knife and finished buttering my toast. Then I ate it slowly, tasting every bite. It was time to start taking care of myself. The way I had been taking care of everyone else. With attention, with intention, with the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I didn't cry that morning. Tears were for people who still believed in accidents. This was not an accident. This was a choice they had made without me. I made tea in my second best cup. The good china could wait for someone who deserved it. The bank opened at 9. I called at 9:05. Claudia Rossi answered on the second ring. Her voice carried the slight accent of someone who had learned English as a gift to herself. I told her I needed to cancel some standing orders. All of them, actually. She asked if I was sure. Banks always ask if you're sure when you're finally thinking clearly. I gave her the account numbers. Sophie's rent assistance. Martin's bridge toll account. Theo's meal plan at college. Isla's art supplies fund. 12 years of automatic kindness, ended with a few clicks on Claudia's computer. The silence stretched between us like a bridge I was finally ready to burn. Claudia asked if I wanted to open a new savings account. Something in my name only. Yes, I said. Something that belonged to me. After lunch I called Dr. Petra Klein. My lawyer who wore silver bracelets that chimed when she wrote notes. I told her I wanted to revoke Sophie's power of attorney. The papers that gave my daughter control over my money, my medical decisions, my life. Petra didn't ask why. Good lawyers know when not to ask questions. She scheduled an appointment for Thursday. We would also discuss my will, she said. My will that left everything to Sophie because mothers are supposed to trust their children. I hung up and looked around my small house. Every corner held something I had bought, cleaned, maintained, protected. For whom? For people who vacationed without me and lied about the reasons. I walked to the window and watched Mrs. Chen hang laundry next door. Her movements were precise, economical. She clipped each item with purpose. I had been hanging my life on other people's lines for too long. The afternoon light shifted across my kitchen table. The same light that had warmed my hands that morning when I discovered their betrayal. But betrayal was the wrong word. Betrayal suggested they had ever truly included me. This was more like pruning. They had decided I was the branch that could be cut away. I opened Arthur's desk again. The important drawer that held evidence of my usefulness. But usefulness, I was learning, was not the same as love. Arthur had been useful once. His steady hands could repair the smallest watch mechanisms. Then Parkinson stole his steadiness, and he became my responsibility instead of my partner. I never made him feel useless. Even when he couldn't hold a fork properly, I found ways to honor what remained. My family had done the opposite. They had taken my abilities and discarded everything else. I pulled out a sheet of paper and started writing. Not a letter of complaint or explanation. A list of what I wanted to do with the money I was reclaiming. Travel somewhere warm. Maybe not Cancun, but somewhere with clear water and gentle waves. Take a cooking class. Learn to make food for one person without feeling diminished. Buy books I wanted to read, not just books I thought would improve me. Replace the old mattress that had been sagging since Arthur died. Sleep in comfort for whatever years remained. The list grew longer as the afternoon faded. Small luxuries, simple pleasures, things I had denied myself while funding other people's dreams. At 4 o'clock the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. Sophie. I let it ring twice more before answering. My house, my phone, my time. Her voice sounded different calling from Mexico. Sun warmed and relaxed in a way I hadn't heard in years. She asked how I was doing. Making conversation the way people do when guilt gnaws at their vacation mood. I told her I was fine. That I had spent the day organizing my finances. The silence that followed told me she understood exactly what that meant. She started to explain about the trip again. The walking, the heat, the stairs I might struggle with. I stopped listening to her words and heard only the sound of someone who had already decided I was too fragile for their happiness. When she finished, I told her I understood completely. That she had made the right choice for everyone involved. Especially for me. I hung up and returned to my list. The paper was covered with possibilities now. Things I could do. Places I could go. Ways I could spend my time and money on someone who deserved both. The phone didn't ring again that day. Outside, the light faded to the soft blue of evening. Mrs. Chen brought her laundry inside, each piece folded and ready for tomorrow. I folded my list and put it in Arthur's drawer, next to all those receipts for other people's emergencies. Tomorrow I would start living for my own emergencies. The emergency of a life half spent on people who saw me as a function, not a person. The emergency of time running out while I waited for them to love me back. I made dinner for one and ate it slowly. Every bite belonged to me. The silence in my house felt different now. Not empty. Spacious. Room for me to grow into whatever came next. Thursday morning I dressed in my navy suit. The one Arthur said made me look distinguished. I hadn't worn it since his funeral. It still fit, though the shoulders felt different now. Stronger, maybe. Or maybe I was standing straighter. Dr. Petra Klein's office smelled like leather and lemon oil. Old books lined the walls like patient friends. She offered me tea in a proper cup. Not paper, not plastic. China that expected you to sit still and think clearly. I told her I wanted to revoke Sophie's power of attorney. All of it. Petra's silver bracelets chimed softly as she made notes. She didn't ask if I was sure. Lawyers who've practiced for 30 years know the difference between impulse and decision. The forms were simpler than I expected. My signature, witnessed and notarized. A few pages to undo years of misplaced trust. Sophie would receive the papers by certified mail. No phone call. No chance to argue or explain. Just the legal fact that I was taking back control of my own life. We discussed my will next. Everything currently going to Sophie and her family. I told Petra I wanted to make changes. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. Leave the house to Isla, I said. My granddaughter who saw things clearly, even when they hurt. The rest could go into a trust. For education, for travel, for whatever Isla needed to become herself. Not for Sophie's convenience. Not for Martin's practical concerns. For Isla's independence. Petra asked about the others. What should Sophie and Martin and Theo receive? Nothing, I said. The word sat in the air like a period at the end of a long sentence. Petra nodded and kept writing. Good lawyers don't judge, they document. I signed the new will that afternoon. My name in blue ink, steady as Arthur's watch hands used to be. Walking home, I passed the jewelry store where Arthur once worked part-time. The window displayed engagement rings that caught the light like promises. I thought about promises. The ones I had kept and the ones others had broken. The promise to include me in family trips. Broken. The promise to pay me back. Broken. The promise to respect me as I aged. Shattered completely. But I had made new promises now. To myself. The promise to stop funding other people's lives while neglecting my own. The promise to spend my remaining years on people who actually wanted me present. The promise to be more than a wallet with a heartbeat. That evening Sophie called again. Her voice had lost its vacation warmth. She asked if I had been to see lawyers. If I was making any major changes. I told her I was organizing my affairs. The same thing elderly people do when they're being responsible. She asked what that meant exactly. Her words came faster now, worry sharpening each syllable. I explained that I had revoked her power of attorney. That she would receive the official papers soon. The silence stretched across the phone line like a bridge collapsing. She started talking about misunderstandings. About protecting me from complex financial decisions. About family responsibilities and difficult times. I listened to her the way librarians listen to patrons who've lost their library cards. Sympathetic but unhelpful. When she finished, I told her I understood her position completely. I also told her I disagreed with it completely. She asked what this meant for the family. For the money I had been contributing to their lives. I said it meant she would need to find other sources of support. That I was retiring from the business of solving other people's problems. After I hung up, I sat in Arthur's chair by the window. The street lamps came on one by one, creating pools of light in the gathering dark. I thought about the conversation. How Sophie had sounded when she realized I was serious. Not sad. Not apologetic. Worried about money. That told me everything I needed to know about what my relationship with my daughter had become. A business arrangement disguised as love. I opened Arthur's desk and pulled out the folder Petra had given me. Copies of all the papers I had signed. The power of attorney revocation. The new will. The trust documents. Legal proof that I still owned my own life. I filed them carefully in the important drawer. Right next to all those old receipts for other people's emergencies. The drawer looked different now. Less like a record of what I had lost and more like evidence of what I was reclaiming. Outside, Mrs. Chen's house glowed with warm yellow light. I could see her moving around her kitchen, making dinner for one. She had been widowed for 5 years. Her children lived across the country and visited twice a year. But she had made a life that didn't depend on their attention or approval. She traveled with senior groups. Played mahjong at the community center. Kept a garden that bloomed for no one but herself. I had been afraid to live like that. Afraid that independence meant loneliness. Now I understood the difference between being alone and being abandoned. Mrs. Chen was alone by choice. I had been abandoned by people who claimed to love me. The first was freedom. The second was betrayal. I made tea in my good china cup and carried it to the window. The steam rose like incense in the lamplight. Tomorrow the certified mail would reach Sophie. She would know that her access to my bank account was over. That her inheritance was gone. That I had chosen to bet on Isla instead of her. There would be phone calls. Visits. Attempts to change my mind or guilt me into changing it back. But the papers were signed. The decisions were made. I was no longer a function in other people's lives. I was a person with my own name, my own will, my own future to protect. The tea tasted better than it had in years. Maybe because I was finally drinking it while it was still hot. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. They arrived on Saturday with tulips and guilt. Sophie carried the flowers like an offering to a god she had offended. Martin followed 10 minutes later. His briefcase suggested this was business, not family. I made tea for 3. The same ritual I had performed hundreds of times when they needed something. But the rhythm felt different now. My house. My tea. My choice to pour or not. Sophie placed the tulips on my kitchen table. Yellow ones. My least favorite color. She had never asked what flowers I preferred. In 40 years of gift-giving, she had never asked. They sat across from me like clients in a lawyer's office. Careful. Uncomfortable. Ready to negotiate. Sophie started with apologies. The kind that sound rehearsed because they are. She was sorry about the miscommunication regarding Cancun. Sorry about the misunderstanding with the bank transfers. Sorry I felt excluded from their family decisions. I listened the way Arthur used to listen to broken watches. Patiently, looking for the real problem beneath the obvious symptoms. The real problem wasn't their vacation. It wasn't even the money. The real problem was that they saw me as a resource, not a person. Martin opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He had prepared talking points about financial planning and family security. He explained how my contributions helped stabilize their household during difficult economic times. How cutting off the transfers could create hardship for Theo and Isla's education. How family wealth should benefit the whole family, not just one generation. I sipped my tea and watched his mouth move. Practical words about practical concerns. No mention of love. No acknowledgement of my feelings. No recognition that I might have needs of my own. When he finished, Sophie leaned forward with her brand strategist smile. The one she used on difficult clients. She suggested we could find a compromise. Maybe restore half the transfers. Maybe establish better communication protocols. Maybe include me in future vacation planning, if my health permitted. If my health permitted. As though I were a piece of furniture that might not fit in their car. I set down my teacup. The small sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. I told them I wasn't angry about Cancun. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was simply finished pretending that usefulness equals love. Sophie's smile faltered. Martin shifted in his chair. I continued talking in the same calm voice I had used to help library patrons find what they needed. I explained that I had spent 12 years funding their emergencies, their conveniences, their choices. That I had contributed over $30,000 to their lives without ever being asked what I wanted for mine. That I had been excluded from a vacation I had helped pay for, then lied to about the reason. The silence stretched between us like a canyon neither side could cross. Sophie tried again. She spoke about family obligations and generational support. About misunderstandings that could be corrected. Martin mentioned tax implications and inheritance planning. Numbers and strategies and long-term thinking. I listened to them the way I used to listen to children who couldn't find their library books. Sympathetic but unable to help them find something they had never actually lost. They had never lost my love. They had simply never valued it enough to protect it. When they finished talking, I told them about my conversation with Dr. Klein. About the revoked power of attorney and the revised will. About Isla inheriting the house and the trust fund for her education. About their inheritance being redirected to someone who saw me as more than a wallet. Martin's face went white. Sophie's hands trembled as she reached for her purse. They asked if I was ill. If someone had influenced my decisions. If I needed medical evaluation. The same questions people ask when elderly relatives start thinking for themselves. I told them I had never been more clear-headed. That my decisions were my own. That I was simply choosing to spend my remaining years on people who actually wanted me present. They left without finishing their tea. The tulips sat abandoned on my table. After their car pulled away, I carried the flowers to my compost bin. Even wilted, they would serve a better purpose there. I washed the 3 cups and put away the good china. The ritual felt different now. Lighter. Like cleaning up after guests instead of cleaning up after my own funeral. The house felt different too. Not empty. Spacious. I had room to breathe without wondering who needed what from me next. Room to make plans that didn't depend on other people's approval. Room to be disappointed only by my own choices, not by the endless small betrayals of people who claimed to love me. That evening I called Mrs. Chen. I asked if she wanted to walk to the pier tomorrow morning. She said yes without asking why I was suddenly interested in her company. Some people understand that loneliness and solitude are different things. Some people know the difference between being abandoned and being free. I made dinner for one and ate it slowly. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and herbs. Food that pleased only me. Time that belonged only to me. A life that was finally, entirely mine. The tulips were already decomposing in the compost bin. By spring they would help grow something I actually wanted. Something that would bloom for no one but me. Outside, the evening light faded to deep blue. Mrs. Chen's windows glowed warmly across the way. 2 women living alone by choice instead of circumstance. 2 women who had learned that family is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes family is the people who see you clearly and choose you anyway. I hadn't found those people yet. But I had finally stopped pretending I had them. Tuesday afternoon my doorbell rang. Not the sharp demand of someone with an agenda. A soft press. Hesitant. Almost apologetic. Isla stood on my doorstep holding something wrapped in brown paper. Her eyes were red-rimmed but steady. She asked if she could come in. Not to argue or explain. Just to sit with me for a while. I made tea without asking if she wanted any. Some gestures are automatic when the right person appears. She unwrapped her package at my kitchen table. A small book bound in cream-colored paper. The cover was hand-lettered in purple ink. Cancun: What Really Happened. I opened to the first page. A photograph I had never seen before. The hotel lobby at sunrise. Empty chairs facing windows full of pink light. The second page showed their breakfast table. 4 plates, 4 coffee cups. A 5th chair pushed slightly away. The space where I should have been sitting. Isla had documented the absence they had all worked so hard to create. Page after page of pictures that told the truth their Instagram posts had hidden. Martin arguing with the hotel clerk about room charges. Sophie crying in the bathroom after too much wine. Theo sleeping on a pool chair, sunburned and miserable. The family vacation that wasn't actually fun for anyone. But the most powerful pictures were the simple ones. Empty spaces that should have held me. A beach chair unoccupied. A restaurant table set for 4 instead of 5. The ghost outlines of someone deliberately erased. I turned each page slowly. Isla watched my face but didn't speak. At the back of the book, she had written a letter in her careful art school handwriting. She wrote that she had wanted me to come. That she had asked her mother multiple times why I wasn't joining them. Sophie had given different answers each time. My health, my comfort, my preferences, all lies designed to make exclusion sound like protection. Isla wrote that she was ashamed of staying silent. Ashamed of enjoying a vacation paid for by someone they had abandoned. Ashamed of posting pictures that celebrated our family while deliberately hiding my absence. She was 22 years old. Old enough to recognize cruelty when she saw it. Young enough to still believe she could make amends. I closed the book and held it against my chest. The first honest gift anyone had given me in years. She asked if I could forgive her. If there was any way to repair what had been broken. I told her forgiveness wasn't something she needed to earn. She hadn't made the decision to exclude me. But I also told her that understanding and forgiveness were different things. I understood why she had gone along with her parents' plan. Family pressure is real. Money complications are real. But understanding didn't erase the hurt of being deliberately forgotten. She nodded and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Not the careful dabbing motion women learn for protecting makeup. The honest scrub of someone too upset to care about appearances. She asked what would happen now. If I would ever trust the family again. I told her about the legal changes. About Isla inheriting the house and the trust fund. About her parents and brother receiving nothing. Her face went white, then red, then white again. She asked if I was doing this because of her. Because she had brought me the photo book and apologized. I explained that I had made these decisions before she arrived. That the will changes had nothing to do with her gesture. They had to do with 12 years of watching her grow into someone who noticed things. Someone who asked questions when answers didn't make sense. Someone who cared more about truth than comfort. She started to protest. To say she didn't deserve inheritance while her mother got nothing. I stopped her with a raised hand. The same gesture I had used in the library when children got too loud. I told her that inheritance isn't about deserving. It's about potential. Her mother had reached her potential. 53 years old and still choosing convenience over character. But Isla was 22 with decades ahead of her. Decades to become someone worthy of trust. Or decades to become another version of her mother. The choice was hers. The weight of that choice settled between us like a bridge she would have to build for herself. She asked what she should do now. How she should handle her parents' anger when they learned about the will. I told her that wasn't my problem to solve. That she was old enough to navigate her own family relationships. But I also told her my door would always be open. That she could visit whenever she wanted. Not because she was my heir. Because she was the only person who had bothered to document what really happened. The only one who had seen my absence and understood it as a wound instead of a convenience. She left the photo book with me. Asked me to keep it as evidence that someone had noticed. Someone had cared. Someone had chosen truth over the easier lie of family harmony. After she left, I sat with the book in my lap. The afternoon light moved across its pages like a blessing. I thought about the difference between Isla and her mother. Both capable of seeing clearly when they chose to. But only one willing to act on what she saw. Sophie saw my exclusion and justified it. Isla saw it and apologized for it. Sophie saw my hurt and minimized it. Isla saw it and documented it. One response came from guilt. The other from love. I knew which one I wanted to bet my future on. That evening I called Dr. Klein. I asked her to add a codicil to my will. If Isla ever became like her mother, the trust would go to charity instead. Some gifts come with conditions. This was one of them. The condition that she remember what she had learned about seeing clearly. About choosing truth over comfort. About loving people enough to include them instead of finding reasons to push them away. I placed the photo book in Arthur's drawer, next to all the legal papers that had set me free. Evidence that someone in my family still knew the difference between right and wrong. Evidence that my trust might not be misplaced this time. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Wednesday morning I used my good china for breakfast. Not because someone was coming. Because I was finally someone worth using it for. The cup felt different in my hands. Lighter. Like something that belonged to me instead of something I was saving for others. I walked to the community center after breakfast. The autumn air carried the smell of leaves letting go. A poster by the entrance caught my attention. Silver Thread Women 65 and Over. Stories, tea, no judgment. I had walked past that poster for 3 years. Always meaning to stop. Always having something more important to do for someone else. Today I had nothing more important than myself. The room smelled like vanilla cookies and old wood. 8 women sat in a circle of mismatched chairs. They looked up when I entered. No one asked why I was there or if I belonged. They simply moved their chairs to make room for one more. Agnes Novak introduced herself as the group organizer. She had silver hair braided down her back and eyes that missed nothing. She asked my name, not my relationship to anyone else. Not whose mother or wife or grandmother I was. Just my name. Eleanor, I said. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The women shared stories that morning. Not complaints or requests for help. Just stories. Margaret had taken a pottery class at 71. Her bowls were lopsided but hers. Ruth had adopted a rescue dog who was afraid of men. They were learning to trust together. Janet had started writing letters to her teenage self. Apologies for all the years of being too careful. When they asked about my story, I told them about the photo from Cancun. About the vacation I had helped pay for but wasn't invited to attend. About discovering that love and usefulness were different things. No one offered solutions or tried to fix anything. They just nodded with the understanding of women who had learned similar lessons. Agnes said something that stayed with me. She said she used to be someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's helper. Now she was just Agnes. And Agnes, it turned out, was more interesting than all those roles combined. I stayed for 2 hours. We talked about books and gardens and the way young people looked through older women as if we were furniture. We talked about money and independence and the freedom that came with no longer caring what anyone thought. When I left, Agnes handed me a small card with the meeting times. She said they gathered every Thursday at 10. She said I looked like someone who had stories worth hearing. Walking home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Belonging that didn't depend on being useful. Acceptance that didn't require payment or service or endless accommodation. Just presence. Just being myself in a room with other women who were also tired of being functions instead of people. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done since Arthur died. I went shopping for myself. Not groceries for dinners I would cook for others. Not gifts to smooth over family tensions. Clothes that I liked. Books that interested me. A small painting for my bedroom wall. Things that pleased no one but me. The saleswoman at the bookstore recommended a novel about a woman who started over at 75. I bought it without checking if Sophie would approve of my reading choices. I bought lavender soap that smelled like the life I wanted instead of the life I had been living. I bought a journal with blank pages. Space to write my own story instead of chronicling everyone else's needs. At home, I arranged my purchases like evidence of a crime I was proud of committing. The crime of choosing myself. The crime of spending my own money on my own happiness. The crime of believing I deserved beautiful things even when no one was watching. I made dinner for one and ate it by candlelight. Not because the occasion was special. Because I was finally treating myself as if I were special. The phone rang during dessert. Sophie's number on the caller ID. I let it ring 4 times before answering. My house, my dinner, my timeline. Her voice sounded strained. She asked if we could meet for lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us. She wanted to talk about the family situation. About finding a path forward that worked for everyone. I told her I already had plans. My first silver thread meeting. The silence stretched long enough for me to count my heartbeats. She asked what silver thread was. I explained about the women's group. About stories and tea and no judgment. About finding people who saw me as more than a bank account with feelings. She said she wanted to see me as more than that too. That she was trying to understand what had gone wrong. I told her nothing had gone wrong. Something had finally gone right. I had stopped pretending that being needed was the same as being loved. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house with my lavender-scented hands and my new book. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Full of possibility. Full of Thursday meetings and pottery classes and rescue dogs who might need someone to trust. Full of mornings when I could use my good china just because I was worth it. Full of evenings when I could eat dinner by candlelight just because I deserved beauty. I opened my new journal and wrote my first entry. Not about what anyone else had done to me. About what I had finally done for myself. About the day I stopped being someone's function and started being someone's friend. My own friend, first and most importantly. But maybe, if I was lucky, other people's friend too. People who knew the difference between loving someone and using them. People who understood that the best gifts don't come with strings attached. People who saw my name when they looked at me, not my wallet. I wrote until the candle burned low. My hand moved across the page like it was remembering how to tell my own story. For the first time in years, it was a story worth telling. Outside, Mrs. Chen's windows glowed warmly. 2 women living their own lives by their own rules. 2 women who had learned that being alone was different from being lonely. 2 women who had found their own names again. Tomorrow I would meet 7 more. Theo called on Friday morning. His voice carried the careful politeness of someone who had been coached. He asked if I would come to dinner Sunday night. The whole family would be there. A chance to talk things through, he said. To find a way forward that worked for everyone. I agreed to come, not because I believed anything would change. Because I wanted to see who they thought I was now that I had stopped being who they needed. Sunday evening I drove to Sophie's house in my navy dress. The one that made me feel distinguished. I brought apple crumble for dessert. Not as a peace offering. As a contribution from someone who no longer came empty-handed to her own life. Sophie answered the door wearing too much makeup. The kind that's meant to hide sleepless nights. She hugged me like we were performing for an audience of our former selves. The dining room table was set with her wedding china, the pattern she had chosen to impress people she barely liked. Martin stood when I entered. His handshake lasted a beat too long, like he was testing my resolve. Theo kissed my cheek and asked about my week. Generic questions that required no real listening. Only Isla looked at me directly. Her eyes held the weight of our last conversation. Sophie had overcooked the chicken. She apologized 3 times before we finished the salad course. Nervous energy radiated from her like heat from a broken radiator. Martin tried to steer conversation toward neutral topics. The weather, local news, anything that wouldn't trigger what he probably called the situation. But neutral was impossible now. Every ordinary exchange felt like stepping around a grave. During the main course, Sophie finally addressed what she called the recent misunderstandings. She spoke about family relationships and the importance of communication, about stress and poor decisions and the need for fresh starts. Her words sounded rehearsed, like a presentation she had practiced in the mirror. Martin joined in with practical concerns. Financial planning and security and the wisdom of not making major changes during emotional times. He had prepared talking points again. Bullet points about wealth management and generational responsibility. They tag-teamed their argument like salespeople who had worked together for years. Which, I realized, was exactly what they were. I listened the way I used to listen to library board meetings. Politely, patiently, with no intention of changing my mind. When they finished their pitch, they looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to fold like I always had before. I told them I understood their position, that I could see how my decisions created problems for their financial planning. But I also told them I didn't care about their problems anymore. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Sophie tried again. She talked about love and family and the importance of forgiveness. About how everyone makes mistakes but relationships can heal with effort from both sides. I asked her what mistakes she thought she had made. She said she should have communicated better about the vacation. Should have been more sensitive about my feelings. Should have included me in the planning process even if the trip wasn't suitable for my health. Every apology was wrapped in justification. Every admission of fault came with an excuse. She was sorry I felt excluded. Sorry I misunderstood their intentions. Sorry the situation had escalated. But she wasn't sorry for lying to me. Or for taking my money while planning a vacation without me. Or for 30 years of treating me like a resource instead of a person. Martin tried a different approach. He talked about Isla and Theo's future. About college costs and career development. About how family wealth should serve the whole family, not disappear because of temporary emotional reactions. He suggested we could work with financial advisors to create a more structured giving plan. Something that protected everyone's interests while acknowledging my concerns. I told him my interests were already protected. By lawyers and bank managers and legal documents that couldn't be guilt-tripped into changing their minds. Theo spoke up for the first time. He said he didn't understand why I was punishing him and Isla for their parents' mistakes. How it was unfair to cut off their support when they had never done anything wrong. I looked at this young man who had posted vacation photos while his family lied to me about being there. Who had accepted my money for years without ever wondering if I had needs of my own. Who thought inheritance was something owed to him instead of something earned. I told him I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply choosing to invest in people who saw me as more than a bank account. People who included me in their lives instead of just their financial emergencies. Isla had been quiet throughout dinner. Now she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. She said she understood why I had made these changes, that she would try to be worthy of my trust. But she also asked if there was any path back for the rest of the family. Any way they could prove they had learned from their mistakes. I told her that learning required acknowledging what you had done wrong. Not just that someone else felt hurt by it. The conversation continued for another hour. The same arguments recycled with different words. They wanted me to reverse my decisions without them having to examine their behavior. They wanted forgiveness without accountability. Love without respect. Trust without earning it. When I left that night, nothing had changed except my certainty that I had made the right choices. I drove home through empty streets thinking about the difference between family dinners and family theater. About the exhaustion of pretending that performance could substitute for genuine connection. At home, I made tea in my good china cup. The ritual felt clean after hours of careful pretense. I sat by my window and watched Mrs. Chen's house. Her lights were on, warm and steady. A woman who had learned to create peace instead of waiting for others to give it to her. I opened my journal and wrote about the evening. Not with anger or disappointment. With relief. Relief that I no longer had to pretend their performance was convincing. Relief that I had finally learned the difference between being lonely and being alone. Relief that tomorrow I would wake up in a house that belonged to me, with money that served my choices, surrounded by people who actually wanted my company. The apple crumble sat untouched in Sophie's kitchen. A contribution they hadn't deserved. Next time I would save my sweetness for people who knew how to appreciate it. People who understood that dessert, like love, should never be taken for granted. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 3 weeks later, the certified mail arrived. Legal documents confirming what I already knew. The power of attorney revocation was complete. The new will was filed and witnessed. My financial independence was no longer a decision I had made. It was a legal fact. I filed the papers in Arthur's drawer and made myself a proper breakfast. Eggs Benedict with real hollandaise. The kind of meal I used to make for special occasions. Today felt special enough. I was celebrating the anniversary of choosing myself. The phone hadn't rung in 4 days. Sophie had finally stopped calling to negotiate. Martin had stopped sending emails about financial planning and family reconciliation. Even Theo had given up asking when I would come to my senses. The silence felt like a gift I had given myself. Space to breathe without defending my choices. Space to discover who I was when I wasn't busy being useful to everyone else. I had joined a watercolor class at the community center. My paintings looked like what they were supposed to be about half the time. But they were mine, created for no purpose except the pleasure of watching colors bloom across wet paper. Agnes from Silverthread had introduced me to her book club. 12 women who read actual literature instead of self-help books about managing difficult family relationships. We discussed characters who made hard choices. Stories where people chose truth over comfort. Books where the endings weren't always happy but were always honest. I had started volunteering at the animal shelter. Reading to cats who had been abandoned by people they trusted. The cats didn't care if I was useful. They just wanted someone to sit quietly and speak in gentle tones. Some had been betrayed by families who promised to love them forever. We understood each other. My house felt different now. Lighter. Like a place where someone actually lived instead of just waited. I had rearranged the furniture to please myself. Bought plants that I wanted to see grow. Hung pictures that made me smile instead of trying to impress visitors who never came. The good china lived in my everyday cupboard now. I used it for Tuesday lunch and Sunday breakfast and any day that ended in Y. Why save beauty for occasions that might never arrive? Mrs. Chen and I walked to the pier every morning now. We talked about books and gardens and the way the light changed with the seasons. She told me about her life in Taiwan before coming to America. About learning to belong to herself instead of always belonging to others. About the freedom that came with disappointing people who had never really known her anyway. One Thursday at Silver Thread, a new woman joined our circle. Sandra, recently widowed, still wearing her wedding ring. Her adult children lived across the country. They called twice a week to check on her but never asked what she wanted from her remaining years. Just what she needed. Medical care and grocery delivery and someone to monitor her declining usefulness. I recognized the look in her eyes. The bewilderment of someone discovering she was seen as a problem to be managed. I told her about the Cancun photo. About the standing orders and the revoked will and the family dinner where nothing changed. She listened the way I had learned to listen. Without trying to fix or judge or offer solutions. Just witnessing. Just understanding. Just being present for someone else's truth. After the meeting, she asked if she could take me to lunch. She wanted to hear more about choosing yourself when everyone expected you to choose them. We ate soup and sandwiches while she told me about her children's plans for her future. Assisted living facilities and sold houses and simplified lives that would be simpler for everyone except her. I gave her Dr. Klein's phone number. The name of my bank manager. The address of the community center. Not advice. Just resources. Tools she could use if she decided to build her own life instead of accepting the one other people designed for her. That evening Isla texted me. She asked if she could visit this weekend. Not to talk about the family situation or my legal decisions. Just to spend time together. She was learning to knit and wondered if I would teach her to make something beautiful instead of just functional. I texted back that I would love to see her. That I had yarn and patterns and all the time in the world. Time that belonged to me now. Time I could choose to share with people who valued the gift of my attention. I prepared for her visit the way I used to prepare for the holidays I actually looked forward to. Fresh flowers in a vase. Good coffee beans for morning. The soft yarn I had been saving for someone special. Someone who understood that knitting, like love, required patience and attention and the willingness to start over when you made mistakes. Friday evening I sat in Arthur's chair with my current watercolor project. A landscape that looked almost like the place I had imagined. The phone rang. Sophie's number on the caller ID. I let it ring twice before answering. Still my house, still my timeline. Her voice sounded different. Tired but not angry. Sad but not desperate. She asked if we could start over. Not with the money or the legal documents. Just with talking to each other. She said she had been thinking about the person she used to be before she became so focused on managing everyone's problems. Before she started seeing relationships as transactions that needed to balance perfectly. I told her I would be willing to have coffee sometime. To talk about books or weather or anything except what she needed from me. But that friendship, if it developed, would be separate from everything that had come before. A new relationship built on who we actually were instead of who we had been to each other. She said she would like that. That she was tired of being someone's daughter and someone's wife and someone's mother without ever being just Sophie. After we hung up, I returned to my painting. The colors had dried while I was talking, but the light was still there. Still honest. Still beautiful. Still worth the time it took to create it. Outside my window, the evening settled into that blue hour when day becomes night without drama or struggle. Just natural transition. Just time moving forward the way time should. I made tea in my favorite cup and carried it to the window. Mrs. Chen waved from her garden, where she was deadheading roses in the fading light. Two women who had learned that belonging to yourself was the foundation for belonging anywhere else. Two women who had discovered that love without respect was just another form of using someone. Two women who had finally learned their own names. Tomorrow Isla would come to knit and drink coffee and talk about whatever interested us both. Tomorrow I would wake up in a house that fit me, with money that served me, surrounded by people who chose my company instead of just needing my resources. Tomorrow I would use my good china because I was good enough to deserve it. The tea tasted perfect, hot and strong and exactly what I wanted. Just like the life I had finally built for myself.